Good
Hi,
morning.
Rachel. Hi.
Overachiever, right on time.
I
Well done.
know. Oh my God, you nailed it.
How's
So much.
Volta? I was
He's
just thinking of
good.
him and the fact that he's like almost a year. He's
I know.
closer to a year than 9 months. Well,
I
kind of.
know. No, you're right. He turned 9 months, and I think that something happened in me. I was like a little like, oh, like I don't know if you felt that with your son. Like it's just like, okay, he's been on the outside world now.
The same
It's a
amount of
thing.
time that he was cooking. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. He's doing
I
good though. Thank you so much. How is yours? How's Duke? I love that name so
He's
much.
amazing. I mean, he's 7.5 and he's like a man. I remember being at that 9-month-old age, and it took me a good 2 years to make the full transition from not a mother to mother, and to really feel the identity was mine and not somebody else's, some middle-aged lady, but it was like,
I
this is me.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a process. And someone else had shared that to me. Good morning, everybody. I
Hi.
asked about Volta, so I'm getting the lowdown.
Good.
Um,
We're just going to talk about babies for an
yeah.
hour.
That's the best.
Perfect.
Yes.
So, but I remember at that age feeling like writing notes to myself. I just want to read and do yoga and make music and take a shower, and feeling like I would never have time to do those things again, and feeling so stuck in that sort of swampy energy of that. And now I look back and it's true what everybody says about the cliche. Like, I mean, Paula, your boys are so grown and it goes really fast. But I think in that first year, it doesn't go fast.
The
Yeah.
days are
Yeah.
long, the years are short.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
I just have to when I used to put like the baby in the car seat, I thought like it just felt like I was pretending. Like that feeling of like I'm the mom.
I love it in the
Exactly.
hospital when they're like, go ahead, take this baby home. You're like, what?
Right.
You're just going to let me leave with this person?
Are you not going to come with me and help? Like, did you see that scene in The Office when Jim and Pam take their baby home for the first
Oh,
time?
no.
And they said exactly that. Like, you're just going to let us leave with this baby? Are you
Right.
sure?
Oh my goodness. I have to say, like, my sister came to get me because of the pandemic. So she came to get me, and we were like quarantined, and my husband and the baby. And they were so excited. They got there early and they were listening to music in the car and just waiting outside the hospital. And when we got in, they turned the car on and it wouldn't start. So it was just like we had to get a cab to like come and
Oh,
jump the
no.
car. I was like,
Oh
we're
my
doing
God.
it. Here we
And this
go.
is in December, so it's
It was
cold.
amazing. It was
Wow.
amazing. It was the best. Such a
I
city moment.
I think you
I
win the
mean,
award for the most high stakes postpartum period, given
Yeah.
everything that you did in those first few weeks. I bow to you, and the fact that you have stayed just grounded and 9 months, baby, you've kept him alive 9 months. That's why they do the 1 year party, right? The kid doesn't know what the hell is happening, but it's
right.
for you guys because you kept him
Yeah.
alive for 1 year.
Yeah, totally. And to say thank you everyone for being here for, it's like a support party.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you though for asking and sharing.
Well, I have 2:34, so why don't we wait 1 minute and then Michael probably hop in when he's able. I want to mention real briefly, well, two things. Surprise, Jess is here. Jess reached out and after we talked about the training last week and asked if she could jump in, and we had the opportunity to go through this material together. Gosh, I think, is it a year and maybe 18 months ago,
Yeah.
Jess? It's been a long time. But when we did that together, we didn't have time to do the actual practices. We went through it more as a teacher's training, saying, okay, when you're teaching this, this is what you're teaching, and now you'll do this practice. But we didn't actually get the time to feel through it and really embody it. So Jess is familiar with a lot of this material, but we haven't had that opportunity. So when she asked if she could jump in, I said, I think everybody here would love to have you. And it's a really nice, oh, there's a cat. It's a really nice cohort that feels really intimate to me already. So I'm glad you're here. And I'll mention really quickly the other piece of business is next week we're going to be doing some eating meditations. So I'll plant the seed now, but I'll remind you next week if you can bring some kind of an orange, a tangerine or a tangelo or an orange or whatever you have, and or a little mandarin, and then some kind of piece of chocolate. That would be great. And we'll
You
eat
don't have to
chocolate at
ask me.
8:30 in the morning.
Chocolate's the best.
That's a balanced breakfast.
Except it's a whole different experience when instead of just shoveling the whole bag in your mouth, you have to like savor the one tiny piece for 15 minutes. So it's fun. But think about that for next week and I'll send you a reminder in case you get caught up in life. And actually one last thing before we jump in, let's just send some metta to Jen and to her mom. Where we closed last week talking about preciousness. And it feels like such a good place to be stepping back into this series with an awareness of that preciousness. So just taking deep breaths for them and offering gratitude that she's able to be there today. Sarah, do you know what time she leaves?
She's supposed to land around 12:30, I think.
Today?
Today, yeah, she's changed her flight. She moved it up to
Oh.
today. Her mom, she's
Okay.
just she's not getting to where they want her to be as quickly as they want her to be. But when I spoke to Jen yesterday, it sounded like when her sister showed up, her mom started improving a little bit. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So Jen's going to be there this afternoon, and then I imagine she'll be just out of pocket Friday. I'll check in with her later and let everybody know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, we'll jump into preciousness. So I'm going to share my screen. I can't see anything in the chat if I'm sharing my screen, so let me know if I'm missing anything. Whoops. Okay. Let's slide you guys down here. And there we go. So this is where we left off last week, the mini preciousness practice that led to some really lovely conversations. And then we wrapped up talking about how that felt in our bodies and what here and now is precious. So sort of moving on from that point, one option to put in your tool belt is to try a simple morning practice that really ties into this preciousness theme. Remembering that planting that seed of preciousness first thing when you wake up can really shape your day. And this gets back to some of what Sean had mentioned too as a daily practice for him in terms of gratitude in the morning. But for instance, after waking up, before you even set your feet on the floor, consider what is precious to you. While you're laying there, maybe you put both hands over your heart. And I mean, talk about how relevant that is right now as we think about Jen's mom having heart surgery. Considering what is precious or impermanent right here. Just last week, we talked a little bit about how if preciousness is a word that maybe feels saccharine, the word impermanence often feels like a good substitute that has a similar meaning.
Rach,
And
do you
then,
mind,
yeah,
do you mind if I jump in real quick? And Paula, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but after last week's call, Paula shared an observation that I empathize with deeply. She said sometimes the preciousness practices make her feel sad. Can you speak to that a little bit? Or like, if not that we're doing it wrong, but I know what she means, like that it's like a heaviness too.
completely.
That maybe if you can like tip into that too much or something.
I would say, don't worry about anything being too much or too little. Trust that you're doing everything exactly as you should, because remember, you can't mess this up. Paula mentioned that in an email after our session last week, and it rang true for me too. I mean, the two words that come up when I think about this practice, often hand in hand, are bittersweet
Mhm.
and melancholy.
Mm.
And it's the colors of those tones of those two feelings that sometimes feel like the flip side of preciousness, of holding your 9-month-old baby, knowing that he will be 18 someday, and that this moment is going to pass even when it's challenging. I think of that a lot, that bittersweetness. You know, oftentimes people will share a photo of their child and they'll say, stop growing up already. And it's that sentiment that we can't cling to this moment of beauty. There's loss as well in the inevitable reality that it will pass. And so I think, first of all, be gentle with yourselves, because it sounds like you're doing the practice exactly as we might. And that bittersweetness and that melancholy is perhaps just a natural part of identifying what is precious. It's that the WandaVision quote, what is grief if not love persevering? It's like there's the grief for the loss of the preciousness or the love that we have felt. And so that love continues, but there is the shadow side that might show up as melancholy. So I appreciate that you bring that up, because I do feel like this is another one of those practices that can easily veer off into bubblegum territory, like pop psychology. Oh, gratitude, sort of Instagram, hashtag gratitude, hashtag blessed, right?
Blessed. Yeah.
Right?
It's so obnoxious.
And we're cheesy meditation people and we find it obnoxious, you know? So, whoa. And that's where I appreciate people who can bring that other tone to this practice, who can identify the fact that it's not all peaches and cream, and that even this practice, for instance, in the morning after waking up, lay there and consider what's precious. There might be sorrow in there. There might be fear in there. There might be anxiety or a sense of grief or loss. And that's okay. It's all human. And I think this practice is designed to draw us back into our humanity and the fact that we are in bodies that will not last forever. And that's the nature of things. So the final little line here says, remain in this moment until you feel quiet, settled, and grateful. You're not obligated to feel any of those things. But those might be feelings that come up. And I would say just allow anything that comes up to wash over you, even if it is that melancholy or that bittersweetness. You know, in this season, I think it's lovely that we're doing this practice right now, because it shows up so much in autumn, the loss of summer and harvest energy, and watching the green, vibrant leaves turn yellow and fall off the trees. There's beauty, but there's sorrow. And so they come as a package. Does that answer your question a little bit, Sarah?
And mine too.
Good.
Thank you.
Thanks to you both for that. So how preciousness shows up in our lives. Over time, this practice or this awareness of preciousness grants a different perspective, aware that nothing is permanent and everything changes. So this core truth of Buddhism, we become more present to what is, knowing it will not always be. For example, when autumn arrives, we're more capable of noting the preciousness of the changing colors of these leaves rather than lamenting the loss of summer. So take a moment and just picture a leaf falling from the tree. It doesn't cling, right? It's not grasping onto the branch, screaming and trying to resist what is so. It lets go with ease and grace, gently kind of wafting on the breeze, knowing that its season has passed. It's surrender as part of its journey, and thus it's precious and it's beautiful. And I would argue also bittersweet and melancholy. And so if we practice this, even in small ways every day, we'll live more fully, gratefully, and presently. And I will say, after first reading this, 2 years ago, when we first kind of wrote the signature series, I started doing this with Duke in the morning. And I would say, okay, challenge, before your feet touch the ground, it's hot lava. Say 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 things that are precious. And I feel like doing that in the morning is a great way to set the tone for the day. We do something similar at dinner time as well. And I think it's just one more opportunity to build that few minutes of awareness into the daily rhythm.
And Rach, I just hang out in that space. I'm going to cry right now so much. And actually I'd like to shift it, because I mean, like, I'm always crying.
Sometimes it feels like too much, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the blessing too of being human and aging. I'm the same way in terms of my my quickness to tears these days, and part of that is being a mother. That definitely changed something. I remember we used to laugh at my mom because she cried at cartoons like The Land Before Time.
Oh yeah.
And you know, it's aging, it's parenthood, it's preciousness, it's realizing that people get sick and die.
Mhm.
And I think that wisdom comes with age as well. And so that we can look at that tenderness and that deep ability to respond as a grace, but it sometimes can feel like it makes just moving through the day challenging. Yeah. I would be interested to see what someone like Thich Nhat Hanh would say about how to manage that, or whether to manage that. I'll do some homework on that and see what I can find, because there is this overwhelming Buddhist teaching that says open, you know, open even in the places that feel broken. Joanna Macy has a great quote that is at the top, or used to be at the top of my website. And the heart that breaks open can hold the whole world. Your heart is that vast, trust it, or something like this. And so there is this constant encouragement to open to the suffering of the world, open to the suffering. And there was actually a really interesting point that Matthew Remski made about Pema Chodron. And he said that maybe that is sort of a patriarchal response to suffering, in that if especially women are always opening to the suffering, it means we're taking on a lot, maybe more than we can justifiably bear. So that's an interesting place to research if anybody wants to write a PhD dissertation. But we can also just see what we can find in the next 5 minutes or the next week.
Rachel, Thich Nhat Hanh gave a really touching interview right before his passing on this exact subject, and I don't have it anymore, but I listened to it right around that time, and it was I appreciated it for what I could at the time.
I would love if you could find that. And in good news, he's still alive. He did have quite a serious health situation. Gosh, it was 5 to 7 years ago. So I think he's a bit more comatose, not comatose, but less able to interact these days.
Okay.
But I think I just saw a post about his continuation ceremony that he's in his 90s. But it's been touch and go for the last decade or so. But that said, I would love if you're able to dig it up. Otherwise, I'll take a look and see what I can find as well.
I'll take that, and I'll send that to the group.
Awesome,
Thank
thank you. And Mike, I should mention, Jess is here today joining us, and will probably be here for future sessions. And I don't know, do you two know each other?
We've not met.
So Jess is part of our core team, and she's bringing so many wonderful gifts to our collective. She's a former professional musician and an MBSR trained teacher based out of New York City. Jess, is there anything else you want to share about yourself?
No, I just will take this moment to say thanks to everyone actually for letting me jump in late. And I was like, I'd wanted to write to Rachel weeks ago, and of course I forgot to do that. And I'm just like, I want to practice. This is that like wanting to have a precious moment. So thank you for letting me join up and just practice, because it feels really good to be here. I appreciate that.
Jess,
Nice
it's
to
nice
meet
to
you,
meet you.
Michael. Yeah.
And do you know Mike and his role, Jess, with Studio B?
Actually, I would love to just, I think I do, but Mike, if you wouldn't mind, I would love to hear from you.
Sure. I worked for a small venture capital fund in State College, and so we're an investor in Studio B. I'm also on the board.
So we have some great opportunities here, especially with, well, I mean, all of us here for different reasons. This training is going to serve, but Sean in sales, being able to speak from an embodied perspective about what our training really does. Mike as an investor and a board member, the same. You know, Paula in marketing, to be able to feel this in her body and share that. So there's a great way that this can show up and sort of ripple out across the work we do. And Mike, the other thing I'll mention in case I forget at the end today, next Thursday, if you can bring some kind of an orange or a mandarin or a tangerine or something you can peel and a piece of chocolate, we're going to do some short eating meditations. But I'll send a reminder in case you forget. Okay, so it's a great opportunity today to join just because this particular lesson is really rich in practices. I think we have 5 today, so we may not get through them all and that's fine. We'll just move through what we can, but it's a lot less of me talking at you and a lot more of us just doing this together. So we're going to move into, this was the closing meditation from our lesson 2, and it's includes a beautiful writing by Mark Nepo called Precious Human Birth. So today, remember your comfortable seat, find that comfortable seat, whatever that looks like in this 9 o'clock in the morning, Thursday body, this body that you have never been in before. Coming into that comfortable seat with your eyes closed if you like, or maybe leaving them sort of softly half open as you kind of softly gaze ahead, grounding into your seat, maybe feeling your feet touch the floor. Hands could be nice and relaxed, hands on top of the thighs, or maybe resting one palm on top of the other. And as we drop into this first meditation today, feel free to choose the aspect of the breath that you'll use to anchor. Anything we've done to this point, anything that feels natural, go ahead and start to drop into the rhythm of your breath, remembering you don't have to do anything to push or pull the rhythm that your breath might have today. You can just let it be as it is. Letting your shoulders soften. Those tiny muscles around your mouth, relaxing. Any tension you might find in your forehead, softening that as well. And as you drop into the rhythm of your breath, open your senses a bit so you can really relax into listening as we move through this simple wisdom from Mark Nepo. In his book of Awakening, Nepo writes, "Of all the things that exist, we breathe and wake and turn it into song." There is a Buddhist precept that asks us to be mindful of how rare it is to find ourselves in human form on earth. It is really a beautiful view of life that offers us the chance to feel enormous appreciation for the fact that we are here as individual spirits filled with consciousness, drinking water, and chopping wood. It asks us to look about at the ant and antelope, at the worm and the butterfly, at the dog and the bull, at the hawk and the wild, lonely tiger, at the 100-year-old oak and the 1,000-year-old patch of ocean. It asks us to understand that no other life form has the consciousness of being that we are privileged to. It asks us to recognize that of all the endless species of plant and animal and mineral that make up the earth, a very small portion of life has the wakefulness of spirit that we call being human. That I can rise from some depth of awareness to express this to you, and that you can receive me in this instant as part of our precious human birth. You could have been an ant. I could have been an anteater. You could have been rain. I could have been a lick of salt, but we were blessed in this time, in this place, to be human beings, alive in rare ways we often take for granted. All of this is to say, this precious human birth is unrepeatable. So what will you do today, knowing that you are one of the rarest forms of life to ever walk the earth? How will you carry yourself? What will you do with your hands? What will you ask? And of whom? Tomorrow you could die and become an ant, and someone will be setting traps for you. But today you are precious and rare and awake. It ushers us into grateful living. It makes hesitation useless. Grateful and awake, ask what you need to know now. Say what you feel now. Love what you love now. Sit outside, if possible, or near a window, and note the other life forms around you. Breathe slowly and think of the ant and the blade of grass and the blue jay and what these life forms can do that you can't. Think of the pebble and the piece of bark and the stone bench, and center your breathing on the interior things that you can do that they can't. And then as you're ready, rise slowly, feeling beautifully human, and enter your day with a conscious intent of doing one thing that only humans can do. When the time arises, do this one thing with great reverence and gratitude. Take in a few final breaths here in this one Thursday morning, October 14th, 2021 body. Noticing your body breathing itself. And then as you're ready, come on back. So how did that feel in your body?
I dropped into kind of more of a relaxed state for the beginning, and just I always get like caught up in, I think I explained it last week, feeling like sleepy. And then as you kind of talk through the meditation and bring awareness to, you know, those other life forms in particular, and then, you know, the chance that we're born human, you know, like the one in whatever gazillions that is, and living a relevant life as a result, that kind of really resonated with me. So in my body, I felt really, really relaxed, but then my mind started to like gratefully think, you know, about that opportunity. 'Cause one of my life slogans is to be relevant. You know, one of my life slogans is to make a difference. So that's kind of where I was through that practice.
I was really surprised, maybe not surprised, but I was really aware of how connected when my mind would kind of like wander away from the words I was hearing, how quickly that impacted, for better or for worse, like the feeling state of my body. So like initially I was like really just like letting the words wash over me and feeling really like in awe of thinking about what we were, you know, considering. So my body felt really mellow and like really heavy in like a really lovely way. And then I started thinking about like, well, how, like why can't more people think this way? Like I got upset at like the thought that like more people should be aware of this idea. So I've like, and my body responded really quickly. It got really restless and uncomfortable until I was able to kind of go back to focusing on like what this meant for me and how that meant I was going to show up in the world and how I was going to move through my day. And then it had that sedative effect again.
I think I had a very similar response to Sarah, or as Sarah. It was a very calming sort of centered feeling. And then I got a whole bunch of questions. Sort of questions just kept flooding my mind, and, you know, make a note and move on. But it was like, well, now I want to know more. And yeah.
You don't have to respond if you don't want to, just if there's something you want to share.
Oh, just yeah, I'm what everyone's sharing is resonating too. I felt very solid feeling and like upright, like and I guess a sense of feeling neutral, which felt calm. And then I too started to notice my inner voice, the voice in my head. But just then going back to your voice, Rachel, like the sound of your voice like snapped me out of like the ruminating, and I went back, and then back to the sound of my inner voice, and I was like, wait a second. Apparently humans are the only ones who have this ability to have an inner voice. And so I was like, I'm going to be really grateful that that's something that as a human I have. And then so then it got me like a little bit more like practicing gratitude and like trying to think of that voice that is sometimes a critic as this, yeah, ability that I don't have to work against, because it is precious. So it was an interesting, just, you know, kind of being in those thoughts and then hearing your voice say something like, you know, the preciousness or like the uniqueness of being human. And I was like, well, that's one of our unique things, I think. Like the ant doesn't have this. So it was interesting. It was a mixture of like feeling the senses of the body and then like the senses of the mind, I guess. And is the mind a sense?
I always find it comforting to remember, and this is something we had talked about in one of the earlier sessions, that the mind is just doing its job in that moment. It's not that we're failing at focusing or failing at meditating. It's the mind absolutely doing the job that it has evolved to use to keep us alive. And that's okay. And so there's that grace and there's that gentleness in it. I found it interesting as I read this that I felt a little bit of pressure, like, oh shit, I got to do something with my life. I was born into a human body. These hands need to do something meaningful in the world instead of, you know, watching Mad Men for 10 hours a day or whatever, you know, we do sometimes at different points in our lives. And I wish I was still in a season of life that I could do that, but another time. So it's interesting how even in a moment like that, reading something quite beautiful with perspective on how remarkable this body is, you can feel guilt or you can feel anxiety. Oh, I better get doing something because I don't have too many more decades in this body. Whatever it might be, there's such a variety of thoughts and sensations that might come up. So that said, what are some things you can think of to help stay more attuned to that precious or impermanent state, because it's so often easy to get sucked into sort of the daily grind or the daily hustle, right? Like getting our kids where they need to be, getting to work on time, meeting the deadlines, and then suddenly it's been a month and we've been at the pace of that grind. Tara Brach also talks about the trance of unworthiness, which is always kind of constantly being in this feeling of not being enough, being unworthy, being inadequate. So does anybody have ideas about things we can do to stay in that awareness of preciousness or worth, or sort of the sacredness of this body or this life?
I really like sensory practices. So, noticing textures and smells and all those kinds of things. And also getting out in nature. Like, it's so silly, but this morning I just had a couple moments and walked barefoot in my backyard, and it was just, feeling, and it was cold, and I felt the dew on the grass, and it just felt very grounding.
Paula, I'm with you on that. I some years ago I switched to like these shoes that are like sort of simulate walking barefoot, let your foot expand, and try to get out at least every other day in the woods with that exact same thought in mind.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting to me is these couple examples are very similar to what we first talked about in the first lesson about moments of our lives when we find ourselves in a flow state, or experiences of mindfulness that maybe we never thought of as mindfulness, like walking through the woods. And something we didn't mention that day and that I've thought of since and wish we had mentioned was playing music. And this lovely man on the balcony playing music to his quarantine neighbor made me smile, because I know for me, that is, especially in moments of anxiety, that's always a moment that if I can sit down at the piano and play, my mind stops and I'm in the flow state and everything feels completely present. So it seems like the answer to this question is, how do we stay more present in this awareness of preciousness, is to turn to our mindfulness practices that yoke our minds back to our bodies.
I'm curious if there is if anyone can recommend like a simple. I've been using the here now a lot since we worked through that practice was that last week or the week
Yeah, it was
before?
last week.
Like, it's just like in my pocket. I use it everywhere. It's been really, really helpful. And I'm wondering if there's like a similar, whether it's a word. I mean, it might be just the word preciousness, or just a word to kind of carry around. Yesterday, I actually had a really hilarious. I was just feeling really like jazzed for life, or 2 days ago, and I was just like driving around, like joyfully, like out loud, saying thank you for things that I have, and it was a really like, and you become self-aware and you like laugh because you're like, oh, you might look like a lunatic right now, but like I was really enjoying it and really embracing it. But that's maybe not practical for like every moment of every day, like standing in line at the bank, or so I'm just
Laughing
curious.
maniacally at the bank.
Yeah.
You quickly
I was gonna
escorted
say,
out.
Sarah, what were you smoking? And can we have some?
I know. Oh, so yeah, I'm just curious if anyone has something they use, or I don't know.
Well, I can think of two things. Meister Eckhart was a medieval mystic, and he said famously, if the only prayer you ever say in your life is thank you,
Thank you.
that would be enough.
Yeah.
So you're on, you and the medieval mystics have it figured out. So I would say follow that intuition, because especially as we've talked about, when your mind is in that state of gratitude, there's not really space for lack or fear or anxiety, because you have the warmth of that gratitude. The other one that could be useful is just like me. And I don't know that it would have the same effect, but I'm thinking about standing at the bank and there's the teller and you're waiting in line for 10 minutes, and you can even picture the person in front of you or the teller themselves. Say that person feels hopeless sometimes, just like me. That person feels madly in love with life or with someone else, just like me. Or that person isn't sure if this is their purpose, just like me. And there's something about those 3 words that's really lovely at connecting us with one another.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Kind of a non sequitur, but like one more time that I am able to, it's so silly, am able to really be present is while I'm mixing my smoothie in the morning and standing at the blender and just knowing that like all I have to do for that minute is stand there and blend my smoothie. And it's just, it's like that mixing the rice, stirring the rice quote. You know, I don't remember which teacher it was, but you know, how did you become such a great meditator when you know, took care of your family? And she said, well, I meditated while I mixed the rice.
I love that. There's a great Zen teacher named Edward Espy Brown, we actually have a blog about him on our post on our blog, but he writes all about baking bread and cooking and working in the kitchen as meditation. And that's very Zen, like that approach of really incorporating the body, chop wood, carry water, that sort of thing. But we've had a similar experience. I got a new seed grinder for my seeds because apparently when you eat like hippie seeds, you're supposed to grind them so that your body can really get all the nutrients. And every morning now for 3 days, Duke and I have a ritual where I say, okay, Duke, do you want to grind my seeds? And it's actually this lovely little moment together where we come and he scoops the seeds and he plugs it in and we stand there and it feels magical,
right?
It's like time out of time. So I really understand that, Paula.
That reminds me of like when I'm changing my cat litter. Sometimes I'm like, all I have to do is this and it's gonna get done. Like this is gonna happen. It's gonna feel really good because this is totally something that I can see happening. And then I'll just throw one other thing that I've been doing that might not work or land at all, but this whole feeling it in the body question is a great one. And sometimes I will hum or just like make like even if I'm in a store, just to see like actually for me it translates as like just to see what voices are showing up. Like, is it the critic? Is it the joyful one? Is it the one that's anxious? And I can tell by just like almost like the hum that I'm making. And then it also like gets me out of my rumination because I'm like feeling the vibration in my body, which kind of feels like my cat sitting on me. So it's like a weird, I don't know, like sometimes I'll start the morning too by just humming. And then it reminds me too, like of like, I guess as humans, like we just, that sense of like making tones and humming was just like, was that before language? I don't even know. So like, it kind of tells me like, what's my mood? And it's not a pretty sound or a musical sound, you know, it's not about making a song. It's just like I'm like, oh, okay, just need to slow down here a little bit because, you know, breath feels short, you know, whatever. So I don't know if that feels abstract, but I've been kind of messing with humming a little bit.
It's interesting how you said it. It reminds you a little bit of your cat sitting on you. And there's something, and I think of your baby, because there's something evolutionary about our bodies wanting to be together, just like when babies want to. I had a baby who would only sleep on my body. So I know this really well, but that heartbeat to heartbeat, whether it's a cat or a human, but the fact that there's that warmth and that connection and that reminder that we are alive, it feels out beyond words. So one last thing I'll do sometimes too is what I did in the meditation, and I often do it when I teach a yoga class, is just say, especially in Shavasana, this is the only Thursday, October 14th, 2021 we will ever have. Like, So what do you want to choose to do with this one precious day that will never be again? And our bodies are different every day that we wake up and we come to the cushion or we come to the mat. And so how can we meet ourselves like with that beginner's mind? Like, this is the first time I've met this body in this pose, or this is the first time I've met this body and this breath in this meditation. So that brings sort of a presentness to it, rather so that we don't go into autopilot. So moving right along to lesson 3, and it's already quarter after the hour, so we're going to have low expectations for how quickly we're going to get through lesson 3. But I'm really grateful for all the rich conversation, and that's really the point here. So we'll just take it bit by bit. So we're moving into mindfulness of body, and I love the way that preciousness sort of walked us gently here, because we've already been talking a lot about how some of these practices show up in the body. So really quickly, just revisiting some of the anchors we've explored so far. Anybody want to toss any out there? What have we used as an anchor so far?
Breath.
Breath, 100%.
Mantra.
Yeah, I was going to say mantra. That was a big one for me this week.
Perfect. All right, so I'm going to expand on a couple of those. So breath is anchor, and we talked about how an alternative to the breath is to anchor into the weight of the hands on your thighs or the soles of your feet. Or another alternative might be your hands over your heart, keeping your awareness there. And we're going to move through a 1-point focus meditation with that set up later. We looked at qualities and sensations of the breath as an anchor. We looked at mantra meditation, as Sean said, here, now, or let go, or other variations. We worked on lengthening the exhale, noticing how our bodies maybe felt calmer after we did that variation. We used shamatha, peaceful abiding concentration practices. So these were the ones when we counted or pictured the numbers coming up on the movie screen, or counted the wave rising and falling. And then finally, we have looked at preciousness, or an awareness of impermanence. So as we move into mindfulness of the body, we're trying to explore these questions. What is mindfulness of the body? Why is it important? And why is it really challenging for many of us? And this could be a whole college seminar lasting 6 months long. So we're going to dip our toe in the water here. But one of my favorite ways to talk about this is that we often move through our lives stuck in our heads, treating the body as just a taxi for the mind. So we're cut off from or unaware of the mystery and the wonder, the sort of miraculous nature, the complexity of the body and its remarkable capacity to serve us. I would say, rather than serve, to partner with us and to partner with one another. Because the more we study psychosomatics, the more we realize the mind and the body are one. So if this is you, somebody who kind of lives a lot in your head, welcome to the club. This is a really important space to be gentle with yourself, knowing you're super normal. I would estimate that probably more folks operate in their heads than don't. And that for those of us who maybe are a little more embodied, it's after years of unlearning or years of conscious practice. So whatever your body or your mind might be responding to this, just notice it. And wherever you are on the continuum of really being embodied or being totally stuck in your head, it's fine. So these are some common ways in which a lot of us might have a challenging relationship with our bodies. Treating our bodies as a problem to be solved. If we just lose enough weight, if we just get the fake boobs, if we just dye our hair, if we could just get some Botox and get rid of the wrinkles, okay? The body as a source of dissatisfaction to be fixed or changed or remedied. And there are huge cultural influences behind growing up and learning to treat our bodies with these perspectives. The notion of the body as an enemy versus as an asset, a friend, or a beloved source of support. the body as something we feel ashamed of. Maybe we grew up in certain religious traditions that attached a lot of shame to sexuality or to sort of natural processes of the body, things like menstruation. Maybe that shame is something we learn as children, and then we have a hard time unlearning as we age. Maybe that shame comes from mass media representations of Photoshop bodies that we compare ours to. There are lots of sources of shame. And the body is something we need to control or manipulate or alter. I would say that the dominant narrative about our bodies in America is that we should control them, that we should diet them to look a certain way, that we should wear the right clothes that make it look this way or that way. So as you can see, there are all kinds of beautiful cans of worms here, different examples of which we might have a challenging relationship with our bodies. And the one factor I do want to mention too, that is underneath a lot of this is capitalism. There are multi-billion-dollar industries out there that are kept flourishing because of the ways in which we struggle with our bodies.
Rachel, I
So,
would love to
yes.
take that. I would love to take that conversation offline to not take the group's time, but that was actually one of the things I had written down in the preciousness practice was, you know, how does the capitalist model work with regards to a lot of these teachings, or how does it not work? And, you know, where I'm sure it's not a blanket statement of just flat out doesn't, but it causes problems, and I'm sure it causes benefits. And there was a big question that I had written down during that exercise.
Thank you. That's such a great question, and one that's dear to my heart, because my graduate school work was all about social theory, like Karl Marx, capitalism, and how those things relate to spirituality in our bodies. So I am happy to jam out on all that with you as long as you want. In the meantime, there's a great Buddhist scholar you could look up. His name is David Loy. Loy, and he's done remarkable work looking at the idea of lack, sort of, and this is related to our bodies as well, the idea that our bodies aren't enough, but also related to the idea that we don't have enough. If only we could get that car or get that job or get that body, then we'd be happy. And this is intricately tied to capitalism, because capitalism is predicated upon selling us the idea that we don't have enough. We need that car, we need that pair of jeans, we need this or that to have value or to be loved. So
It's
David
the
Loy,
maximization of the use of resources.
yes, and that, oh gosh, this is such a rich conversation, because that's exactly it. The idea that capitalism is always, you know, trying to pull as many resources from the earth, for instance, as are necessary, versus the Buddhist and sort of mindful perspective of living simply and maybe living beneath our means, or walking lightly on the earth, because we're in relationship with all the other living beings, things like trees, versus plowing down trees in the Amazon to build a highway. So yes, let's definitely follow up on that. That would be a really cool workshop, or there are all kinds of cool things. Blog posts, there are all kinds of cool
Or
directions we
podcast
could
or
go with
something.
that.
Yeah, I think we could probably jam on that for a bit, because it's a question, you know, that in you know, this line of work in particular, you know, the maxim is always, you know, you have to do as much for your investors' money and return as you can, right? And, you know, part of there's a, you know, that is the job, but at the same time, how does that theory play itself out when you get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger? I don't have an answer to that question.
But this is exactly the engine behind capitalism, the idea that we always want to be expanding. And the idea that pulling back or even resting or stepping off the treadmill is not a good thing. And that's really in contrast to a lot of these spiritual traditions, especially now. I think of the NAP ministry, you know, places and people who are saying rest is sacred, rest is essential. We can't always be grinding, we'll burn ourselves out. And so there's a term in Sanskrit called santosha. It's basically the practice of contentment. being able to look around at your life and say, all right, I'm sitting on a bench in the sun, drinking a cup of coffee. And right now in this moment, that's enough. That is exactly what capitalism does not want you to do.
And I fight it because, you know, I do try to take those things personally, but that's a very selfish view, because I can't answer that question as to how that gets implemented broadly, right? It's I'm doing this for me. That's unhelpful in the grand scheme of things. So I don't have a cogent answer as to why that's important, and then how the two competing interests balance. I don't know if there's a balance.
And I think if you can figure that out, gold stars to you, because a lot of folks have been trying to make sense of it. And this is where too, there's so many interesting Western influences in terms of sort of neoliberal philosophy that are very tied into capitalism, the idea that it's an individual thing and I got to work hard and my success is dependent upon me. And there's that very sort of individualist perspective. And if you pull up by the bootstraps, you can succeed too. And it's sort of in contrast to the very collective and interdependent awareness of mindfulness traditions that say we're all connected. And so we have to take care of the planet because we all are affected by that. So it's rich. Yeah, and you can go so many directions with it. And you can look at it in terms of the body, like our bodies, or the world is the body. And all of these things actually apply to the planet as well.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, for I guess just around this capitalism, and because of the people that are in this room with marketing and sales and like just your expertise, you know, like capitalism for me leaves out, Rachel, as you're beautifully describing, like this aspect of being sustainable. So, and yet, if it's brought back into the narrative, I'm not abandoning capitalism. I'm just basically thinking about myself as a freelance artist, an entrepreneur inside of the wellness world. Like, I'm participating in capitalism by building my business, but I'm not leaving out the sustainability bit by resting, by not rushing, but not trying to be bigger than I am and not being smaller than I am. But if that narrative of sustainability gets brought back into capitalist discussion, I actually still monetarily can swim in these capitalist waters. And maybe the benefit of that is that I actually serve more and make more in a weird way. But I don't try and, the cost of me just climbing the ladder without the sustainability as part of my storyline, I actually probably won't succeed or make as much money and will serve less people. So this is where my mind is. And I'm just so curious about how you can bring wellness or sustainability into the capitalist. I think Studio B is doing that. I think actually Studio B is a model of that. But it's so interesting because I'm like, I want to make money, you
Me
know,
too.
I want to have a certain lifestyle, you know, I want to be able to get that, like, you know, whatever. Yeah. But that rest thing is so a part of sustainability because we need that in order to fuel and be passionate. Activists need to rest. Mm-hmm. So it's an interesting thing because I feel like the storyline in culture is like sustainability. What the heck is that word? You know, climb. But I think the smart way to be with capitalism, or I don't know if smart. Anyway, I'll stop. But what do you all? What is your expertise? Anyway. I love this I love being here. Thank you so much, everyone, for letting me join me
here.
And I love, Mike, that you brought that up. Thank you.
And
especially
Jess,
from your professional perspective.
Yeah.
I think you made a really good point about sustainability and how it's perceived, because I hear that word, it's like, well, that means it's not going to make money. Right. And that's the stigma behind it. Now, my personal belief is that they have to come together. So exactly what you described, you know, I'd love to see happen. I asked that question to a group of undergrads. I was given a talk 2 weeks ago, and I was like, I'm gonna ask a question I don't have the answer to. And I really, because you all think about this very differently than I do, help me understand. And we never got to an answer, but I posed that same question as, how do you create the capitalist model in a sustainable fashion, right? So how does the ESG, or name your alphabet soup, investment strategy, how do you implement that so that the money goes in and it comes out more so that you can expand what you're doing? Or maybe that's not the game anymore. I don't know. But it was a really interesting, it's an interesting experience to get the take of the 20 somethings on that topic.
I'm reading that generation is a lot more socialist. And in part, it's because they're having such a different experience financially than maybe the boomers did. And it's in response to that. But yeah, especially as somebody who's in that professional realm, Mike, I feel like you have such a potentially rich perspective on that can be really, really useful. So
At minimum, I'll ask some questions. I don't know if the perspective's worth much, but maybe there's a good question in there somewhere.
It is a good question. It's a thought provoker. I mean, I wish we had more time because my mind is racing, because I'm thinking about, I've worked for very large companies like a Grainger Industrial Supply, $12 billion company, selling millions of products through distribution. And I think, Mike, when we spoke in August, I told you every time I hit a submit button on an application for one of those types of companies, I kind of cringed because I didn't want to sell another widget, and distribute more cases of toilet paper and fasteners and whatever else. But to Jess's point about Studio B, I was very intrigued about providing or selling, which is a dirty word, a service, that could actually make an impact, right, on a person, and then ultimately a company. But I too have struggled. So shouldn't those services be free? Right. And in my ministry, even, right?
yeah.
Hey, I should do this for free because I shouldn't make money on trying to help people. But then what I've learned through some of my entrepreneur friends who are not in a Grainger world, but have built businesses that have made them millions of dollars, they do get to live an extravagant lifestyle. They get to travel and do whatever it is they want to do. But to their credit, they also help tons of people and do things in third world countries and so on and so forth to help build economies and have one hand scratch the back of another and then that person. And so I think if done right, there's a benefit to making a lot of money if you're the type of person that is mindful about the world and other people and the environment. And I think that's where, the balance comes in. It's who you are. Just listening to you, Mike, who you are is that kind of person. So there should be no guilt or shame in making a lot of money, because what you're going to do with it is going to help somebody else make a lot of money. And all of those people making money are going to be able to lift other people's boats. And I've had such a bad relationship with money for really my entire life because we never had any. And so I have a goal and a quest to make money so I stop hurting. There's a post online yesterday by this guy that I follow, and he says, the only people that say money doesn't make you happy are people that don't have it. And I don't really agree with that necessarily, but I understood what he was trying to say. And money itself doesn't make you happy, because relationships make you happy. Love makes you happy. the things that we experience together. This conversation makes me happy. That cup of when you were talking about the cup of coffee on the bench, one of the things I enjoy the most is sitting out by my pool, listening to the filter and drinking that cup of coffee early in the morning while the sun kind of hits my face and is hot, but then there's a breeze that cools me off. Like, I love that. And then I open my eyes and I see my dogs doing whatever it is they're doing in the yard. Like, I enjoy those moments more than anything. That's happiness. But what I found about money, or the lack of money, is I can't fully enjoy those moments when I'm worried about the bill, the mortgage, the surgery, the this, the that. So I don't think money makes you happy. I think it allows you to remain in that state by taking away financial worry. And I think money can really, really help if you invest it in the right things, like people. That's where I stand with it, but I haven't had any for the majority of my life. Yeah, so I would love to continue this conversation, because it would gain, I think I could gain some understanding, especially with, talking with people who perhaps have had a little more financial success than I have had, or have used that financial success in ways that make a difference.
Why don't we pick up right here next week? And, Sean, what I hear from you and what I think is so related to what Studio B does is that we are doing all of this to help relieve people's suffering.
Mhm.
And so I feel conflicted too, in the same ways that you've mentioned, like I should be offering this all for free. How can I charge people for these trainings, especially when they're handed down by generations of teachers? And it comes back to this felt experience of having suffered, having experienced all of those sort of very human moments of loss and grief or uncertainty, and having learned these tools with which my relationship to those feelings has been transformed. And so being taken to a place of ease. And what you were saying about money in terms of it being able to lend some of that, the word ease came to me. Like, if there's enough, there's ease. So if the dog needs a surgery, it's not going to keep you up worried for 3 hours at night because you don't know how you're going to pay for it. And that's where it does relieve some suffering, right? Because there's some spaciousness around it instead of it constricting. And Angel Kyoto Williams talks about suffering as constriction. So anytime that we're tense or we're tight or we're constricted, like about money, for instance, that's suffering. And when we can soften and feel spacious, that's the liberation. So maybe the goal is how to feel spacious around money and what that has to do with capitalism and with enoughness and all of those rich topics. So I hate to cut us off here, but I am mindful that you have full days to jump into over there. So thank you for this conversation. It's really a pleasure every single time. And we may or may not get to the orange meditation next week, but if you think of it, bring it and bring your chocolate. And if nothing else, we'll have a chocolate party and then do it the next week.
Rach, if you
Yes.
run into any articles relating to anything that we've discussed, you can feel free to send them along.
Oh, let's make a Slack channel, guys.
Oh, good
Ooh.
idea.
No,
And we
not
can drop a
another
lot
thing
of
that pings
those.
on my phone.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
I'm related to that.
I hate Slack. It totally stresses me out.
Thank you, Paula.
Yeah, I prefer email myself as well. It's like
Yes,
one more thing.
email.
Yeah.
And also,
I
like,
know.
I lose things in Slack.
Exactly.
Like, where do they go?
Yeah,
What
I'm not
channel
good
was
at,
that in? Damn it.
I'm not great at Slack either. I'm a big fan of text groups, text groups.
Likewise.
We can do that.
Well, it's actually redeemed by Sarah's gift for GIFs, though.
Yes.
Like Sarah has a special gift for that, so I appreciate
does.
that. Thank you,
The
Sarah.
timing is
Yeah.
always perfect. On
It's
them,
always
too.
perfect. Yes. All right, let's log
Thanks,
off for
everybody.
today, and I'll
Thank
see you
you.
all same time next week.
All right, awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
Have a great
Thanks,
day, guys.
everybody.
Everybody.
Bye.